Hello, again, my name is David Ammons. I'm in another one of my podcasts as we get to know more people in the industry. Today I'm thrilled to be talking with someone that I've known since I was 22 or 3 years old, so I'll say my whole adult life has been a part of my life, and that is Phyllis Mayo. Phyllis will tell you more about herself in a minute, but has been in numerous roles or several roles at Springmoor over the years and is with us today just to visit and talk about that some. So it's chatting, it's talking, it's not interview or to be nervous whatsoever. So introduce yourself a little bit, where you're from, how you got into this business. And
Okay. I grew up in eastern North Carolina in the small town of Stantonsburg, very, very small, and moved to Raleigh after I had graduated from seminary and worked here for a while. And then in 1983, before there was anything built at Springmoor, had an interview to work here and started work here in 1984 in August. And from there, my life has just blossomed. I live here now. I moved here 2 years before I retired in 2019. I moved here in 2017, and I figured that I was doing everything here but sleeping and eating, so I might as well do those things here as well, because this was really home to me.
yes, good. So talk a little bit about the different jobs you had here. I know helper and then activities, and
Okay.
you fill in those blanks.
When I first started, there was nothing built, basically. There was a little bit of stuff built, but I was hired to do activities in the health center. I did that when the health center opened. I started working in August of '84, but the health center didn't open until March of '85. And I did activities for a while, and then the state came in and said, well, you have to have a social worker too. So I was told by Marshall Evans, who was my executive director then, that I needed to be the social worker. So I decided if I was going to be the social worker, I really needed to know what I was doing. So I continued to work full-time and went to school part-time, and over a period of 3 years, and got my degree in social work, and did that for 7 years. And then people were beginning to, there were a couple of people in particular, but people were beginning to say we needed a chaplain. And since I had already been to seminary, I was kind of set for that job, and so I was granted the opportunity to become the first chaplain here as well.
I know something you and I have talked about, but not in a long time, was you did a phenomenal job and phenomenal sensitivity to, and I know some university chaplains I've heard this from, how do I serve as chaplain, whether you're Protestant or Catholic or XYZ, you know, all the other options. So
Yeah.
speak to that.
That's been an interesting thing here. I grew up in, the town I grew up in had Baptist, Methodist, and Pentecostal Christians. And I had never been to an Episcopal church. I had never been to a Presbyterian church. I knew nothing really but Baptist and a little bit about the Methodist. And when I came here, I realized that we had people from all these different denominations, and I also realized that we had some people that weren't interested in church. We had some people who were avowed atheists. And I realized fairly early on that I was here for all of the residents. All the people here were going to probably encounter some need for some counseling, at least at some point, and I wanted to be available to everybody. And we had one gentleman that I remember in particular that was an atheist, and he would come by my office frequently and stop in the doorway and tell me a preacher joke.
Oh, that's good.
And there was another couple here who were atheists. They had been through the Holocaust back when they were children, and the woman and I got to be very close. And I remember her saying at one time, sometimes I'm envious of people with faith.
Wow.
So she was exploring all this
Yeah.
time what she was seeing around her, and but we tried to respect
Well, I think
who
you did
people
phenomenal. You
were.
were ahead of your time, and everybody has a spiritual self.
Right.
They may or may not have a religious
That's
self.
exactly right.
And that's finding
Exactly.
that balance.
Right.
And with no judgment, whether it was, as I say, nationality or
Right.
completely different. You mentioned different denominations, but we've also had I won't say all the world religions, but numerous.
Right.
So that's great. How about overall? How do you think residents today? I know you are one, so we'll say today, meaning 5 or 10 years. How are residents in the 2020s relative to how residents were in the 80s and the 90s? Do you see much difference, or do you think that?
Well, I heard you talk about that earlier. I see some differences in a lot of ways, and I see no difference in some ways. I think in the beginning, people were learning what a CCRC was and wanted to test a lot of things. So when we had meetings, there were lots of questions, like a residents association meeting. And people wanted to make sure they were getting what they paid for. And now that that's a more common thing, people know that people scour the country looking, some people do,
Sure.
Looking at different retirement communities, and they look around us in Raleigh, and they make their decision based on what they see. And so I think they come here with a different view in mind. They see things here that they don't see in other places. And I think they come here knowing that they've chosen the place that's suited for them. That's the biggest change I've seen. And I think people are demanding in some ways now that they weren't in the beginning, because there's more to demand, like the internet and things like that. But basically, it's a place that people just love and care for each other. That's the thing that's always been kind of the bottom line. And I think that started with Judd and Joellen, that it was built to take care of people and for us to be here for each other in sickness and in health, and we've been here for each other in that
as
way.
you know, she's referring to Judd and Joellen, who were my parents, who were, I'll say instrumental, but that's way undervaluing that word of their input in forming Springmoor and making it all that it is. I think that's right. One thing I have found intriguing that I think you and I have visited a few times, and we share something or a concept that I don't have anyone else that I share that with, and then we go, oh yeah, I think we've both thought about that, but not talked about it. But one thing I find intriguing is I can picture in my memory some people that came here who were just not worrying about health care, not worrying about change, not worrying about all that. And when their needs changed, or when a health break, we used to call it a health break, occurred, changed that. And then their children, literally, some of them second generation, come without that pushback to, I want to live independent, I want all the fellowshipping and everything, but I also know that can be very helpful at the time. And that's almost I watch the parents' experience teach that to the child.
Right.
It's an adult child, so I'm not sure they taught it. But
and I've heard some people say, moving to Springmoor was the greatest gift I ever gave my children, because it gives them the freedom to go on vacation and not worry, or they know I'll be taken care of if they're in Europe for a month, or at the beach for 3 weeks, or whatever. And that's a very, very good thing. And that's kind of been there from the beginning. And I moved here actually 2 years before I retired, because I was beginning to experience some health issues that I inherited from my mother, and I knew it was not going to get better. And I thought, I work there all the time. I don't eat there and I don't sleep there, but why not? Just
Was
just
part of
move
that
on
tied to
in.
your birthday?
Was what?
What you just said reminded me, wasn't part of your moving in tied to your birthday? I
It
can't
was
remember.
the day I went to see you and talk to
Is
you
that
about
right?
moving in was my birthday, and you said, "I think we can do this," and I said, "That's the best birthday gift
Yes.
I've ever had."
Well, and I didn't know it was your birthday until you
It
added that
was.
part. So
It
that's
was.
neat. So one thing I find very intriguing, having been in management in this industry, is a day. And I use the example all the time. As executive director, you can have a, whatever, I don't want to go into my details, but you can have a 9 o'clock visit with two very disgruntled employees. You can have an 11 o'clock visit with a couple trying to decide to move. You can have a 2 o'clock visit from a lady whose mother just passed away. I mean, the diversity of a day is unbelievable. In your role, I'm sure it's a whole nother layer of what people bring up. You celebrate with somebody at 1 hour and then you cry with somebody the next hour.
Exactly, yeah.
What's
It's
that
kind of
like?
like Baskin Robbins
Oh.
used to be when they had, I think they had 32 flavors of ice cream, and you just never knew what flavors you were going to get in one day. I mean, you might get 2 flavors in one day and 12 flavors in another
That's a
day.
neat way to put it.
And every day was different. I can remember sitting in my office, and sometimes I'd get in my head too much and be studying or trying to organize something or planning a service, and I'd think, I need to get out of here. And what I would do would be to get up and go to the health center, and automatically it just cheered me up to visit people in the health center. You would think, oh, don't go there. Why go there to see people? But that was the place that I found the light and the brightness that I needed to find.
Priorities.
Yeah.
Priorities come to focus there.
Yeah.
How about how do you have stories or examples or thoughts on how you, being the chaplain here, was represented in Greater Raleigh? Like I would meet people who would tell me, I would be at the mall or at a social event, and they would say, "Oh, I met your chaplain," and they were so complimentary. So you wore that badge all the time.
Well, I think part of that had to do with the fact that I did a lot of memorial services for people who lived here, and people would come here if a person was a member of a Methodist church or a Presbyterian church or a Baptist church or a Catholic church. A lot of times they would have their service here and people would come, and I would get to know them that way. And we invited a lot of ministers from various churches in town, and that really got me involved with people that I wouldn't have been involved with. I was never a member of a ministers group, but
And there's a lot of those.
But I kind of made my own group
Yeah,
in that
yeah.
way, and just got to know people. And
Was a lot of that tied to Vespers? Talk about how
a lot of it was,
how we
yes.
did that on
Yes,
Sunday nights
Yes, on
and-
Sunday night, right.
And
right.
I know the Vespers one week would be, I can't even think of all the denominations. We'd
Right.
have Lutheran this Sunday and maybe Pentecostal the
Right.
next Sunday.
And
so-
I would promise them, I said, I knew they were busy, and I would say, I'm going to call you one time this year. I'll call you again next year, but I won't call you another time this year.
Oh.
Because I knew they were busy. They wanted to come, but they had their own priorities, and getting them here one time a year was my priority. But it made for a really diverse worship style that everybody could enjoy.
How much have you, I don't want you to be too, I'm not asking you to divulge, obviously, too many details or individual cases, but I know from people that talk to me about how you help them, how many people came here and their spirituality or faith grew or changed. So I wouldn't say you were converting and baptizing, but
Right.
but people made major transitions over
Yeah.
living here,
Yeah.
and your role in that, it was all, I don't know what to describe that. Was it parent or shepherd or?
Well, one thing I did was I did a lot of small groups. This room, for example, we would do a small group in, and we would get 18 or 15 or 18 people in here. We'd just drag in chairs, and there was one lady I remember whose husband had died, and she was very, very thoughtful about things. And she would come to me a week after we had met, or 10 days after we'd met, and she'd say, you know, when I go to bed at night, I think about what we talked about in that group. And it wasn't necessarily a religious subject that we were talking about. Maybe it was something about aging or various things, but I think that helped people to grow in ways that they didn't realize they could still keep growing. And I saw that happen with any number of people.
Yeah, I bet. I bet you were
Yeah.
very close to it. Switching gears a little bit from so much spirituality to just people. You know, we've had only a few former employees become residents.
Yeah.
But we're about to have more. I don't know if you know who all's on the
know.
waiting list or
I'm
different
excited
stuff.
about that.
But I'm curious how you've enjoyed transitioning to living amongst the people that you had a different role, and that's getting ready to happen to some others.
Right.
You know.
I love being retired. I thought it was going to be harder than it has been. I've tried to stay out of the way of the other chaplains. A preacher doesn't retire and go back to the church that he's been pastoring.
Oh, I didn't know
And
there's a
so
rule. I've seen that, but
I've tried hard not to get in the way, but I have a scooter that I ride since my walking's not good, and I park my scooter in front of my door, and people know not to knock on my door if my scooter's there because they know I haven't gotten up yet.
Oh.
So I take the advantage of, like the coach that's retiring over at UNC, I think the women's soccer coach,
Anson.
he said I like to sleep, I like to read until about 4 o'clock and get up about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Well,
Wow.
that's kind of my schedule.
Wow.
Not exactly, but
Yeah.
I've enjoyed doing that, and it's been fun to be here because I can be perfectly alone and be perfectly satisfied, or I can open my door, go out, hear people chatting in the hall, go out and talk with them. I can go to the dining room, or I can eat by myself. I can just choose to do the things that I want to do, and I still drive, so that's good. I can get off campus if I want to.
You in a Beetle?
No,
We used to compare our
I don't
Beetles.
have my Beetle
Oh,
anymore.
I had one at the same time you did, so we compared our Beetles.
Yeah, my green bug juice.
Mine has a clutch, so you didn't like that. I am curious about, my thought just escaped me just a minute, but, oh, the Beetle threw me. Hold on. I wanted to talk about, had to do with people over time. Oh, I know what it is. So one thing I've always found intriguing, you mentioned going to the health center sometimes to overcome a bad day or something. I'm so intrigued, having been here a long time, that you see residents when they first move in and they're wanting to know where they park their bicycle and wanting to know why we don't go to events later at night, and then time marches on, and then even when I walk down the health center hallway sometimes it's a little odd to me. There's the names of people that I knew in a completely
Right,
different setting.
right.
So are there any of those stories or examples without names of just
Well, I have
severe
my own
switches?
story.
Sure.
In January, before I retired in November of 2019, I had a knee replacement and spent a couple of weeks in the health center,
Oh,
and which was a real blessing for me. I have sisters, but they both live out of town, and I didn't want to stay by myself in my apartment. So I stayed in the health center. And then earlier this summer, I spent 5 nights there. I was sick. In the evening, I just realized I was too sick to stay by myself, and I called, and within an hour, I was in the health center.
wow. Yeah.
And had really, really good care. It's hard sometimes to watch people change
Yeah,
and
age.
decline and age, but you also know that that's the cycle and the circle of life, and that we're all going to come there at some point. And so it's not depressing to me. It might be
glad
to
you
some
said that.
people, but it's not.
Well,
to me.
I'll tell you a crazy example that you may know the person, so we'll leave their name out again. But I was recently meaning a couple years ago, with someone, and I needed them to sign something. And I did not realize their health issues that would affect their ability to sign. And I put the document down, and they took the pen, and they were shaking so bad. And suddenly I was embarrassed or didn't know what to do. And they very calmly held their hand and they said, you know, while it makes it hard to write, it makes it so easy to brush my teeth. And I just thought, that's how people cope. That's how people cope with the change, right? It's so inspiring to see how people cope.
You know, one of the things that we did in one of my small groups was to talk about the word senescence. Have you ever heard that word?
I don't know that word. No, ma'am.
The word senescence is indicative of ripening. And it's, if you think about it, S-E-N is the beginning of the word senile, but it's also the beginning of the word senator.
Oh.
It's the beginning of a number
You're
of
not
words.
No, never mind. We won't tie those together right now.
No. But it's the beginning of a number of words that have to do with aging. And what it really means is that we're coming into our fullness as we get older. We're not diminishing, we're really ripening. You don't go out and pick blueberries or strawberries before they've ripened, and so that's what happens here, is that we ripen here, and people, there is some truth to there being wisdom in aging.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Good. Anything else you think you want to add or say? I've enjoyed talking with you. I've done more listening, but that's great. I wanted to.
Springmoor has been the joy of my life. It really has been. It has been home, and it will always be home. And I have my own personal blood relatives who are my family, but Springmoor's really my family too.
Well, and I know your move here required the packing and the tremendous mileage of, what was it, 0.6 of a mile away or something?
Yeah.
So yes, you moved almost a half a mile.
Yeah.
All right.
It's
Well,
been
thank
great.
you, Phyllis. Thank you for everything.
Thank
you
you.
for visiting today.
Thank you.
I hope you've enjoyed the podcast, and thank you.
Thank you.